travelled on the sea ice by dog sled, which has experienced something extraordinary. Everywhere you look, it is white. You may as well be on another planet. It was amazing for me to go back. I rediscovered this extraordinary place, which is it's another world, really.
The world Stephen Leonard is revisiting is in Qaanaaq Greenland. Out on the sea ice, snowmobiles are still banned, and in town, the silence is only broken by the howl of dogs. Kanak is so far north, Admiral Perry launched his expeditions to the North Pole from here, guided by the same indigenous hunters whose relatives still live here. They have the skills to navigate through water so cold it could kill in minutes. For a year, Leonard endured the world's toughest climate, studying the Inukway's language and unique ways of communicating.
Here, Anne-Sophie is trying to teach me a few basics. I'm not a very good pupil.
Hvordan sier man nei? Igjen.
Now his old friends will take him back to a magical place that's literally disappearing.
You've lived with them. You know them in a way that most Westerners, people outside of their communities, don't know them. What is happening?
Well, most fundamentally, the sea ice is melting, and it's melting very fast, faster than they've ever known before. Now, what the melting of the ice means for this community is that it's becoming harder and harder to hunt. And what we're seeing in northwest Greenland is a culture really very much under threat because of climate change.
Climate change is a bread and butter issue here. Because Qaanaaq's frozen fjord is the hunter's main highway to fresh food.
Tell me about the hunt.
Okay, so it's a team of 4 hunters: Masula, Christian, Aviak, and Naiminichok.
You say their names very well.
All unpronounceable names.
Well, as a linguist, you better say them well.
Aviak Peterson, he's a hunter in his 40s. The dog is really incredibly important to their culture. Then we have Christian Iper, who's quite a character. He has remarkable knowledge, and he's gone way up north. Then we have Masula Christiansen. He's been hunting all of his life. And finally, Naiminichok Peterson, who has been hunting for 35 years. He came along with his grandson, William, who's just 11, and was a very impressive driver of dog sledge.
It's a critical skill Naminachuk wants to pass on to his grandson.
Clearly, if one is going to be on the ice in that region, you're going to be very glad to have any one of these men by your side. Describe their knowledge.
It's intricate, it's complex. They live very close to nature, and this is summed up in the concept called healer, which is the word for mind, consciousness, but also weather and climate. I think for them, climate change is actually a philosophical problem in the sense that they feel that the rest of the world has become too detached from nature. Of course, there's lots of different words for different types of snow and ice. Snow, which is sometimes it looks very hard on the surface, but it's actually very thick, so you can sort of sink down into it. That's called the mangonakto. I was often told that you couldn't live for long term in that part of the world without knowing their language.
They need to survive.
That kind of knowledge, which is encoded in language, is actually really useful in such a hostile environment.
But centuries of accumulated knowledge can't explain what's happening in the Arctic today. And in May, the open sea in front of us would normally be frozen solid up to the furthest islands, the area's best hunting ground. When the world becomes unrecognizable, the hunters are forced to turn it on its head. They've hitched dog teams to drag motorboats out to the open water.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised because you see it's getting closer to our village. The future makes it a bit more uncertain for the hunters. They don't know how to react.
It's a real struggle, even for the powerful Greenland dogs. They've been tied to Arctic hunters for 5,000 years on their long march from Siberia to Greenland.
These hunters have big dog teams. They are incredible animals. They are very powerful. One dog can pull sort of 70 or 80 kilos, but they need a lot of food. And that food is becoming increasingly hard to come by.
Okay.
Working with his dog team, Aviak strains to pull their skiff up the final hill. But he still needs more dog power. A second team is brought up and lashed in.
Hot.
One more task awaits the hunters. Drop in their boat at midnight when the tide is at its highest. Now the hunters can set up their camp on the ice foot, the last precarious shelf of sea ice clinging to the mainland. The hardy dogs always sleep on the ice, but they'll be sleeping hungry tonight. But it's no laughing matter. If the dogs aren't fed, they won't have the strength to make it back home. Survival depends on the success of tomorrow's hunt. It's morning where the summer sun never sets, 700 miles north of the Arctic Circle. William collects the 1,000-year-old glacial ice while his grandpa cooks up fresh walrus meat caught by other hunters.
That's what is our life about. We have to catch our food from the nature. It gives us pleasure, happiness. Without that, there are no people up here.
And without dogs, there would be no hunting.
They have to catch something to feed the dogs. You have to prioritize the dogs.
Masoli will lead today's hunt. He's leaving his dogs behind, but hopefully not for good. Traditionally, the dogs led the hunters to the seals' breathing holes. Finding them in open water is a lot more difficult. This is where walrus and seals would usually bask in the sun, but not today. Finally, one of the hunters spots a large bearded seal. And the chase is on.
People watching this are going to be shocked, some of them, that these indigenous people are hunting for seal.
I'm an animal lover. I don't like to see animals being killed. It's not something I enjoy at all. What I would say is there are a very small number of hunters. Between 50 and 60 hunters have a full-time license. They live in an area the size of Germany. Even if they were out hunting every day, I think the impact on wildlife would be fairly minimal.
Masole doesn't want to waste the precious catch. He must spear the massive seal with a hand-thrown harpoon before it sinks to the bottom.
These are people who live, in harmony with nature, and they're interested in going out hunting to get what they need. It is a subsistence mindset, and then they will return to the town or the settlement with the food for their families, and that's it.
Relieved they can feed their dogs, the hunters pull into an Arctic ghost town called Tkach. When the supply ship stopped coming, the old hunting post was quickly abandoned. It's an ominous sign of their future, but a convenient place to divide up their kill.
If they choose not to live the subsistence lifestyle, then they still need to eat. And where does the food come from? It comes in the form of processed food, primarily on a supply ship from Denmark. And if you think about all the CO2 emissions from that shipping route, frankly, it's not worth it. It's better to let them just live the way they've always lived.
But how long will that be possible? The temperature in the Arctic is rising at double the world's speed.
You look around these remote settlements in northwest Greenland and you ask young people what they want to do with their lives. It's almost impossible to find anyone that wants to become a hunter.
Back on the other side of the sound, the dogs pick up the smell of success. Namanitchuk stands by his grandson, teaching him how to feed the ravenous dogs. But he knows William will need other skills to navigate the future.
If they don't hunt, what do they do? The prospects look so dire, with climate change accelerating and the sea ice disappearing. It's difficult to know what plan B is, really.
In this unforgiving wilderness, everyone has to have an escape plan. Especially when a sudden spring thaw threatens to sweep the hunter's equipment out to sea. It's the last day of the hunt, and this is as far as the Kanak hunters can go. Broken sea ice has blocked the way to where they suspect the animals have gathered. Impossible to reach by dog sleds and too dangerous and expensive for their small boats.
We were out there for 5 days. We didn't see a single walrus, polar bear, We saw one bearded seal, and the reason for that is that the sea mammals are retreating with the sea ice. The hunters were surprised, perhaps even shocked, by the fact that there seemed to be very few animals in the region.
And there were more shocks to come. On the way back to their campsite, the hunters are forced to maneuver through a shifting maze of ice. Back on the ice foot, they have to spring into action. A strong tide is sweeping everything in its way.
Suddenly, the shape and face of everything is changing before their own eyes.
You are studying a culture that is dying.
I think the Inuhui are living at the end of an age. I think what will happen is that the Inuhui will be forced ultimately to give up hunting by dog sledge. And of course that means that a lot of these dogs will have to be killed. And that's a sad story that we've seen up and down the west coast of Greenland over the last 5 or 10 years.
But don't tell that to the Kanak hunters. That's certainly what Masule wants to believe as he gets closer to home and his family. Masule is returning home empty-handed, but in today's world, that's not a crisis.
It's rather difficult to find one family now in northwest Greenland which is living from hunting alone. So often what has happened is that the wife has gone out to work in a school or in the community hall, or perhaps even the small hospital, and the man will still go out and hunt.
Although this hunt wasn't successful, there is still good news at home. Masule's lead dogs have given birth to 6 puppies. They will be the next generation to carry on the dog sledding tradition. Naminitchuk, like all the hunters, is painfully aware that his fate is no longer in his hands. All Naminitchuk can do is share some of the life lessons he's learned with his grandson. No one could have predicted that this would be one of Naminitchuk's last hunts. A month after guiding his grandson home, he died from a sudden illness.
If this way of life is lost, what is a loss to the world?
I think their message is, the clock is ticking. wake up, world, look at what is happening. If the Greenland ice sheet behind you melts one day, then we know that sea levels will rise 7 meters. That means that London, New York, Netherlands, whole countries are underwater. This community is the cultural canary in the coal mine. Climate change is not going to affect this one remote community in northwest Greenland. It will affect the entire planet.